The OTR lifestyle is brand new to a lot of people coming into this industry. So getting your research, talking to some others out there, finding a great mentor that's been through this, has years under their belt, that has done this, that can talk through that, hey, weeks out there on the road is going to be a lot different than you leaving your warehouse job and going home Friday at 5 every single day.
Welcome to Drive, the podcast for truck drivers who are looking to enhance their lives both on and off the road, and for carriers looking for that perfect fit trucker. I'm Zach Elsts.
And I'm Chelsea Faulkner.
And we're here to bring you conversations that will help keep you moving forward in every area of your life. Whether you're a seasoned trucker or just starting out in the industry, this is a show for you.
So Zach, that was an absolutely amazing conversation that we just got to have with Brad and Sean in regards to all of the things that newly graduated truck drivers should know and consider before it is that they just jump out into the industry. What do you think about the conversations that we had?
Well, the timing couldn't be better. We're in the middle of and at the end of all the graduation stuff in the season to begin with. So like reaching out and talking about recent graduates and how they could expect to see and what they could expect to go through. And, you know, obviously we can't name names in the trucking industry because, you know, this is a business and you got to respect everybody's business, but just understanding and finding out from their vantage point what drivers could be doing to help better their new career, because you can mess it up fairly quickly. It was good to hear that information. You know, I thought it was interesting when Brad was talking about just some of the different, you know, levels of experience that drivers can get to doing different types of commodities. And Sean was talking about the drivers that, you know, may be looking to get into a certain area. So like they only spend a short period of time to get their experience with one company. And you kind of get a feel that companies kind of know that. So it would be nice if like maybe up front, recruiter would be like, hey, listen, this might not be the best job in the world, but you can get 2 years of experience over here. So I thought that was a cool and a refreshing take on marketing and the things that drivers could look at.
Absolutely. And really driving home that authenticity piece just across the board, whether it's with other drivers that you're building community with, or the companies that you're looking to work for, or the recruiters that you're talking to, just making sure that you're really hitting those down to earth, hard conversations that you have to have before jumping in. And I really feel like following this conversation, it's not just going to be the responsibility of the new truck driver to be figuring out what they're doing, getting into the industry, but it's really kind of putting the pressure back to the companies on what your culture look like and what is your onboarding versus orientation and how are you supporting drivers, whether they're brand new walking in just after getting their CDL or whether they've been in the industry for 10 years. How are you supporting them through their career?
Well, whether you like it or not, if you're in the trucking industry, you're a stakeholder and people need to start acting like stakeholders. And, you know, people that are in the marketing side of it, you know, they have an obligation to speak the truth and they also have an obligation to make money. So if they could come up with a really fine mix of both, that would be a better thing and it'd be a better world for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, without giving out too much detail, I feel like if we get too much further into this conversation, we're going to give away the podcast. So let's go ahead and get started.
Sounds like a plan. Well, guys, welcome back to another episode of Drive. We're here today. Chelsea Faulkner and I are on for our next season, episode 2. We're joined by Brad and Sean, Brad Hackett, Sean Horton. Guys, thanks for coming on board and joining us today.
Dynamite, no, very much happy to be here. Super excited. Definitely hold you, Chelsea, and the overall team in high regard. So it was quite the honor to even get the invite, let alone be sitting here in front of y'all right now.
Happy to be here as well. Thanks for having me.
Now, we're absolutely excited to have this conversation. You know, so many different topics that we could cover when it comes to driving, right? You know, Drive is kind of a podcast that we developed because we wanted to highlight what's important in the driving world. We hear all these different nuanced numbers. There's all these different types of things that are in the business side of it, the different areas of it. But our goal was to kind of highlight what's important to us, which is the drivers, because they're the backbone of what this entire movement is all about. And so for us, it's like important to have that conversation. And before we really get started on all the meat of the conversation, Brad, let's tell us a little bit about what you do. You're with C1 Trucking, the truck school. Tell us a little bit about what you do in your respective role in the industry.
Yeah, my name is Brad Hackett. Spent the first part of my career, better part of a decade, on the trucking operations and dispatch side of the world. So fell in love with the logistics, putting all the pieces together, and most importantly, working with great drivers that we've got in this industry, and spent the last 4 years transitioning over to director of recruiting and retention type roles. So I'm with C1 Transportation. We're out of Joliet, Illinois. Transportation, open deck variety specialization there. And happy to be here to discuss this topic and more to come.
Sean, what about you, man?
I'm just hoping Brad doesn't blow me out of the water in all this and embarrass me. But, when the day is said and done, my name is Sean Horton. I'm the Vice President of Sales with jobsandtrucks.com. Overall, my entire career has been stemmed around recruitment, marketing, and advertising. Long and the short of it, my goal and my role in our organization is to effectively help organizations like Brad at C1 match themselves up with new to the space or those that have been doing it for decades, but ultimately the CDL drive making in the recruitment and the retention front, of course, since you make a right hire, they stay for life.
Awesome, guys. We're here to talk about the trucking industry, how to get into it, some of the things that we're going to be doing in this industry.
So today's panel was kind of my brainchild. Last year at the end of the season 4, I really got out there and I identified the need for our newer drivers, our drivers that are first coming out of CDL school. We're having these drivers that are coming out into the field. They're going out, they're going through 3, 4, 5 different jobs in their first year. They're going out, they're not realizing that, hey, if I'm out on my motorcycle and I get a DUI, that's still going to affect me in my long-term career. There's all of these little pieces and parts that they're not quite gathering from their CDL school, from their mentors as they're coming out. And instead, they're just kind of thrown into the mix. And it's like, oh, here you go. You have a new CDL. Go ahead and go start driving. See what happens in a year. So instead, we really wanted to bring you guys together to have this conversation around what are some of those topics that those first-year truck drivers need to know in order to make sure that as they're getting on down the road and into their 4th, 5th, 6th year in their career, that their career is really solid and something to stand on. And what are those little tips and tidbits out in the field that they need to know in order to make sure that they're making the best choices for them and for their longevity of their career?
Absolutely. No, spot on topic. And, and Zach, and honestly, when the day is said and done, the idea of the truck driver shortage is actually a good, I would say, stemming point in all of this. When you look at new driver space, right? COVID brought a plethora of interest in the overall opportunity to be a driver, depending on who you talk to. One can argue driver shortage versus oversupply of drivers. Now, today, we find ourselves in what I would consider overcapacity or an influx of drivers, meaning the overall imbalance between supply and demand is completely flipped. For many decades, maybe even before I was born, the wide sages in the space have told me that there has been an imbalance, meaning there are not enough drivers for the opportunities that have been available. Fast forward to today, and really, I would almost say last year, Brad, agree or disagree with me anywhere along the way on this. I know obviously you keep your hand on the needle there being in the trenches, but when the day is said and done, we are now in an oversupply, right? We are over capacity, and it can be much more challenging for new drivers in the space to break in and find that opportunity. For me, what I really have been finding is that whether you are experienced or whether you're new to the game, that many drivers don't understand how to be a professional, quote unquote, candidate, right? How am I setting myself for success? How do I separate myself from everyone else that is out there that is now looking for gainful employment with so many in need, right? What do we do? More than just what's your name? Do you have a CDL? And what is your years of driving experience, as many had been accustomed to when we look to the quote unquote shortage times? Brad, anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, great topic there, Sean. I think one thing to add, unfortunately, drivers have what I would consider the best BS detectors of anybody I've ever talked to. And unfortunately, if you think about it, that had to come from somewhere. So early in their career, if they were sold sunshine and rainbows and were lied to about getting in the industry, what they're getting into, it's a bad taste on us as companies out there and also the industry as a whole. So really looking forward to this conversation. I've always prided myself on being real, being honest, being upfront. And there's a lot of things that drivers can do that they just don't know about coming into the industry to, as you said, Sean, set themselves above the rest and really look forward to that long-term career in this great industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys are talking about the sunshine and the things that drivers are asked to do, offered to do. It's almost like marketing works everywhere, but in the driving world, the way that marketing has been promoted through all the different methods of how people do stuff and how they try to get their message out there. And a lot of trucking companies, I think, run into this problem because, like Brad said, the drivers understand what they're being taught to. They can read between the lines. You're not going to be able to get away with using an AI technique or an AI tool when you're using recruiting for drivers, and you're going to be able to use some of that kind of stuff, but you're going to need to be able to use real people, the kind of people that are out there beating the pavement, are driving the trucks, that are making the freight move. They're wanting to interact with the people that are out there that are just like them. They're not trying to deal with someone that's above their head or over their role or somebody that they can't really kind of be related to. So I think it's important to talk about this topic, some of the stuff that goes along with it, but ultimately, why do we have a passion for hiring drivers, guys? Tell us a little bit about where your passion stems from. Sean, where did yours get started with?
How the industry and how the community has embraced me overall. So I will be the first to say I transitioned from CareerBuilder to jobsandtrucks.com. So those of you that aren't familiar with CareerBuilder, quote unquote generalist job board, I was working in healthcare and manufacturing. Fast forward, I was hired on with job statistics and jobsandtrucks.com and was very much humbled when nobody thought my what does a reefer driver really drive joke was funny, or the fact that I had no idea the difference between a CDL A or B. Needless to say, finding the right people in the room to, of course, help me grow myself and really understand more about the industry has allowed me to be here for now 10 years. And I would never look back. I have been very easy to have written me off into, oh, here's another sales guy, another office guy, and who knows where I would be. So I just really love how the community has really banded around and accepted me.
Sean, I can only laugh because your reefer comment, one, I had the same question. Two, the day that I had to call up Aaron and ask him what a lowboy trailer was because I was honestly terrified to Google it for fear what may pop up. Yeah, I get that. I feel that. We completely relate there. So
there it is.
Brad, what drove your passion?
Yeah, I fell into trucking and right out of college, and I fell in love. There were like 5 scenarios of drivers from super different backgrounds that are just working their tail off to provide for their family. A guy from Florida that wants to work 3 months and then take 2 or 3 weeks off, enjoy the beach with his family almost in retirement. You got a young and hungry cowboy from Kentucky who he's 6 generations deep in the industry and all tied in. That's just loving trucking from the moment they were born. You got somebody from Africa that has moved over, that's sending money back from their family, coming over, not even knowing the language and getting to be some of the safest, best drivers out there on the road. And so many stories like that, that I really got engulfed in just people to people connections and working together that I can do from behind the scenes and help these ladies and gentlemen out there on the road provide great from their families.
Yeah, trucking's got a magnet to it. It's one of these things that once you get into it, you really don't know what you ever thought about it. Well, anyways, we're just talking about what our love for the transportation industry is all about. And my biggest thing, really, blue collar, no collar, I love the idea of helping people out, the stories where people come from. Hard work has always been a big thing for me. So people that turn wrenches, people that do the things that seem kind of cool. I guess the 5-year-old in me is still alive, but that's why I love this industry, because you get a little bit of everything. It's like a smorgasbord of people, and you meet some of the coolest. You will hear some of the best stories. And I've heard stories from guys from one guy who, there was that ship that they had out in the Bay Area when COVID first started, where everybody was stuck on for weeks. One of our drivers was on that ship at one point, and he told us wild stories about they went to San Antonio for 2 weeks and playing cornhole every day, and until they got their, what do they call the social distancing, and their period of time where they were able to kind of get reintroduced back into society, because we didn't know what COVID really was. And hearing stories like that, and just all these different ways that people have been impacted, because in the trucking world, everybody's trying to get a job of some kind and do something that generates some level of revenue. So to me, it's like, it's a cool way of tracking how people are having success in different areas of what they do.
So speaking of Zach's meat and potatoes over here, I'm going to back up and kind of get into that just a little bit. So Brad, you were talking earlier about how drivers are oftentimes sold just sunshine and rainbows before they come into the industry. I know, especially back during the pandemic, that's what you started to see everywhere when we were having this driver shortage is, come on, sign up, come be a driver, and you are going to make 6 figures. You're going to be making bank for your family, and you're going to be able to do it on your own terms. So guys, talk to me a little bit about how we saw that shape in with all of these new drivers coming into the industry and what their thought process was as they were coming out of CDL school, and maybe where we could have reworked that a little bit.
Great topic there, Chelsea. I think a couple of things come to mind is one, timing. We had the craziest market swings that the industry's ever seen, of the most MCs created. And unfortunately, now that the market's switched, it's the most MCs shut down. So you could drop a truck in the middle of anywhere in the country, and make buku bucks and everybody's high-fiving, but that only works in a hot market for so long if that's your strategy. The other piece of that is drivers get some connection or false hope of the best situation of I'm local, home daily, making $120,000 a year, that they don't understand that that is the niche of niche positions that have to have amazing safety record, long-term tenure, and live in the right spot. And then there's only so many of those available. So we can't have them come into the industry expecting that everybody is going to get that perfect position that they're looking for right away.
For real. Sean, anything there that you would add?
Really just understanding solid expectations overall. I mean, Brad really hit the nail on the head with really setting yourself for success. So whether that's ensuring and understanding you're moving into a professional role, blue collar, white collar, it doesn't matter. Anybody looking to take steps forward in their career should be setting themselves up as a professional in what they will be doing. Secondly, is those just the expectations overall. If you are new to anything, whether you are new to the CDL world and being a CDL driver, or you are new in sales, or you are new in recruiting, you have to start at the bottom and you have to start somewhere. And that's real. And that's something that, again, needs to be understood. Those coveted roles Brad mentioned, right? That may be the end goal. So as you get yourself started, ensuring that where you start and how you start to set yourself up to achieve that goal is very much pertinent.
And it can't be something that you deal with an emotional decision on, right? This can't be one of those jobs where you allow your emotions to overpower yourself. You have to you're almost like a professional athlete at this point. You've got to be in control of your emotions almost more than anything else, because you're behind the wheel of something that's going super fast down the road, or you're going to make a decision that's going to have an impact in a bunch of different other people's lives potentially. Whether it does or whether it doesn't, it's kind of up to you, because you're driving something that's so safety sensitive. And one thing I noticed when I first got into this industry in the hiring side, it took me a few years to get into the hiring side of things because I was doing a little bit of everything, but I was just absolutely astonished. I think this was probably back in 2012 a little bit, but drivers were like, they'd come to do an interview and you didn't have enough papers for them to fill out their work history. And it was like, whoa. And so I started, instead of judging it at the time, I just started asking people, like, be honest with me. What are you really doing here? And they would give you this story, and then they'd stop and be like, you know what? This job sucked. This job was absolutely not what I thought it was. This recruiter told me I was going to get this. You never met a single person. You got a phone call to show up to a truck somewhere. Never had an opportunity to, and there was plenty of those types of stories. And the thing is like, if this is a problem for this person hiring over here, why do so many people have their company title with so many jobs that they've moved around from, and they're still getting hired back on? You'll see somebody go to the same job 4 different times in a matter of a year. And then you're thinking to yourself, how does this equate? Is this something that was trucker transportation kind of specific? Is this like some kind of niche type of activity that I wasn't aware of? But no, I mean, it seems like in the driving world, this is a really big thing. Only other industry that I've really seen this in is nursing. So, Brad, what are some of the thoughts behind the job history and why people are moving around so much?
Yeah, Zach, that's a very hot topic in the industry. Is companies are really transitioning more. Again, big market swings have a factor of this in a certain extent, but I think a lot of companies have realized in a good way that a more quality hire is a lot easier to retain and have a long-term relationship with your organization. So from a driver's perspective, you need to know that coming in, that if you hop jobs every 3 to 4 months, that looks really bad for a prospective for that role that you're really going for. If they're looking at your record and they see that you can't even give it 4 or 5 months on average over the course of your career, that's not going to look good for you to get those positions that you're going after.
So, Sean, what do you think it is that some of these newer drivers need to be looking for? Or specifically, what are some of the red flags they need to be listening for whenever they're going out and they're interviewing with some of these different companies, or when they're talking to recruiters? What are the things that they need to be listening for that would just slightly alert them to the fact that maybe things are not what it seems underneath the surface?
Competitive pay. No, overall, there's a plethora of different elements that one needs to take into account. That's where I step back into really understanding your goals and aspirations, both short-term and long-term, for that specific reason, right? You find yourself in the job hopping conundrum. then you basically have extended the longevity with which you can achieve your long-term goals and or shot them in the foot potentially, depending on where you are. But key is transparency, right? As much tangible, transparent information as you can gather so you can make an effective decision that could make or break the rest of your life. I throw the term competitive pay in the marketing world and in the wide world of spin that is marketing. There's many different ways to, of course, throw a cover over what's really underneath the hood, right? And, that is one element. When I hear competitive pay, well, what I consider competitive versus what you consider competitive can be two different worlds. I live in New York. I live in Indiana. Competitive pay is going to be two completely different numeric values when the day is said and done. So as much as you can push and understand organizations to share specifics on what expectations can be, and also take a dive into rating systems, review and understand what other drivers are saying in the space about said carrier or said opportunities that you may or may not be considering. These guys that have been in it forever, and even the guys that are new that may have found themselves in the job hopping conundrum, I'm sure would be more than happy to share with those that are new the experiences they have so they can help others prevent going through the challenges that they have or may still be experiencing.
One thing to add to that, Sean, is the cost of each of those transitions is helping the driver understand if you're leaving for another job, there's going to be some gap time associated with that. You're going to have to turn in a truck. You're going to have to transition and get to the next orientation. You're going to have transition of your benefits if you have benefits with the organization. And then you're going to have to wait until you get your first check. Often it's going to be a couple $1,000s, if not more, for each time that transition happens. So educating the drivers that, yes, you're having a frustrating situation, you're looking to potentially leave, but let's take a step back and not make a rash decision and see what's best long-term, which not every time is going to be hop to that next job.
Yeah. And Brad, that honestly, what you were saying there brings up another really important topic, I think, for new drivers especially, which is that whenever you're looking for that next job, whenever you're looking for that next position, you need to understand that when you're having the details discussed to you for your starting times, that orientation and onboarding are two completely separate processes. And if the companies that you're working with are not looking at having an orientation of some kind, you're likely getting thrown in a truck. And you're going to be expected to pick up and go from wherever it is that they put you in that truck and learn it on the fly. So making sure that you understand the differences between onboarding and orientation. Have you guys seen anything in regards to that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, just being with the trucking companies, I've seen everywhere from immediately turn the key, you're a qualified driver, hit the road, to some companies have weeks and are very specialized and super hands-on. So it's balancing that financial impact, what's going to be best for the driver's relationship coming on board, and finding that sweet spot that you can only retain so much in a classroom over time, but you don't want to just turn the keys and go because there's so many important things that are unique to your organization.
Absolutely. And Sean, I saw you getting ready to talk. What do you feel like it says about a company's culture if they're willing to just throw you in the truck as opposed to telling you a little bit about who they are and what they're doing and what it is that they're expecting out of you by the end of the day?
You as a driver and or the team and or the organization are not the main priority. You start looking at areas where we're cutting safety, right? We're to me, that's an ultimate that's a safety concern, right? And that again is then said company setting up said driver for potential failure. Something were to happen in that instance, this driver's life is potentially ruined. If now all of a sudden they find themselves in some form of violation that may or may not have been prevented if there was proper orientation and onboarding put into place right out the gate. As much as we all want to think that, employers, hiring managers, recruiters, et cetera, have said driver, us in their own best interest, that's not always the case, which is where we then run into, again, many of the challenges we've already touched on at this point in time.
Yeah, and drivers kind of need to focus and understand that, the trucking world is a great place to make a good income. It's not going to be a get-rich-quick scheme. You're not going to go out there and hit the highway and get 1 million miles in that first month. It'd be nice if you could, but you're regulated to not even be able to do a certain amount, right? So what are some of the things that a trucker should be looking for in a training session? So when a driver's getting started, if they're brand new and they're going through the company, they're going to have maybe a trainer with them or a CDT. And a lot of the things that person that they're interacting with for the first time, to glean those from them. They're going to learn some of those behaviors. So what are some things that a new driver may want to be on the lookout for, because they're just a blank canvas at this stage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They're excited to get in the industry. They're eager to get going. I think a couple pieces of advice is, one, make sure that you're doing your research on the training program that you're getting into. Are they a quality focused school, or are they a quantity focused school? Are they going to get you in and out real quick and get you out on the road? That may look good on paper, but what is that experience going to be like of what you're going to learn during that and getting going? Also with the training programs, often they're the OTR lifestyle is brand new to a lot of people coming into this industry. So getting your research, talking to some others out there, finding a great mentor that's been through this, has years under their belt, that has done this, that can talk through that, hey, weeks out there on the road is going to be a lot different than you leaving your warehouse job and going home Friday at 5 every single day.
It's effective transparency. I mean, how much information and understanding, whether it's the job itself and what you're going to be doing once through training, or really what those steps are going to look like. I've worked with some organizations that literally overall you can get a full overview of, here is training, here are all the steps all along the way that you can expect until you are in the truck. So in a perfect world, this is what your life is going to look like for the first month, 2 plus. Having that, again, allows me to properly plan and properly set expectations for myself and what's to come.
So here's a fun question for you both. And this is something that I feel like all new drivers and really anybody in any industry should really have a good grasp on before they just jump headfirst into things. Is training a one and done thing? Or is it something that should be ongoing, that they should be looking forward to engaging in different kind of training modules, engaging with their mentors, engaging with their managers, ongoing throughout the longevity of their career?
Easy answer for me, Chelsea. That has to be an ongoing mindset of, you're only going to learn so much in a short time frame. And especially the more you get into trucking, like at C1, we specialize in a variety of open deck freight. You've got crazy oversized loads out there with specialized things for load securement, extra safety. Yeah, that stuff is really cool to haul, but you're also taking on that responsibility and that risk of the added risk associated with that. So you have to learn that along the way. You're not just going to leave a classroom in a week and know how to do everything that you're going to need to do over the course of your career.
Spot on. I'm just going to throw my 2 cents and say I completely agree with Brad. I mean, I think it doesn't matter what you're doing. We should always be continually learning, and those we are associating with and those that are employing us should be positioned to continue to grow us, whether it's as a driver or whatever other role may or may not be involved in the organization. Anyway, not going down a rabbit hole. Brad, I agree with you. We'll leave it there.
One small thing to add is some of the best relationships over my entire career have been with drivers that have connected with other drivers that are wanting to learn together. They have that right mindset. So one of my favorite drivers I'm still in touch with today, even though we haven't worked together in a decade, Renard. We had a great relationship at the start. I was his dispatcher. It was his first time doing a lease program. So it's taking that step from a company driver to a lease. And we worked together, ongoing dialogue, figuring stuff out together. But he shared with me that his whole start, he had 2 or 3 drivers that he could call at any time with any question out there that had been out there for 10 plus years. And that is so valuable to have that solid mentor that you can lean on, maybe a couple in your bag that you're stuck in a situation that you don't know what is. Let's call a professional and get their opinion and talk through it, where admittedly your dispatcher can only help to a certain extent behind a computer, right?
Absolutely.
It's good to be confident, right? We see a lot of people out there, and you see this in sports stars. I bring it up again. Sports athletes tend to, because they get a lot of publicity, they get a lot of exposure. But you want to be confident without being arrogant in the industry, because arrogance is what's going to cost you a job, an arm, and a leg potentially. It's going to be something where if you don't know, you may want to stop and wait. Make a phone call. Stop, pause, and think to yourself, what's going on? You want a long-term goal. You want to stick around for a long time. You've got to think long-term. You're not in a short-term industry. A lot of people, again, get back to this idea that they can get into this industry because of the high dollar amounts that they can make. And a lot of companies out there, to the discredit of what they're doing, is they're running short-termism. They want to come in and make a company better to sell it and make more profit. How are we doing this when we're trying to get people to create long-term careers? using short-term business practices. So I think one of the things that we've found that I've seen in the industry is there aren't a lot of people that deal with drivers the way that they should be dealt with. I feel like they're always dealt in short-term fashion, whether they come into the office, how quickly can we get them in and get them out? How quickly can we get them back out on the road? But, it's just a different concept of treating people like people versus treating them like another commodity. They are a resource for sure, but truckers are not commodities in this industry. So, Sean, what are some of the importance of long-term goals for drivers to have? And can you talk about some of the goals that drivers might be able to set that are easy to set themselves up for more success and how people can achieve these goals over their first few years in the industry?
Can you say that one more time?
Fully loaded question.
Well, I was trying to think of a way to say this question all in one. So what are some things that a new driver can do, a few goals that they can set themselves up for if they want to become long-term in the industry? So if they're trying to achieve some of these goals over their first 2, 3, and 4 years, what are some really good practices a driver could start to do to achieve those goals?
I would always say find the right carrier, right? Because, even in looking at career, are we looking at a career with one carrier or are we looking at a career with multiple carriers, right? And really what that looks like. Am I starting out my endeavors within the CDL world, within the driver world with a company that I see myself with in 5 years? That may or may not be the case. There are many great organizations out there. Many of the, we'll say, mega carriers, for lack of better terms, are in a position to hire students. I get on with a mega carrier. Do I plan on sticking with them indefinitely, right? Do they provide opportunities for me to find growth? So, if I'm looking to be, for example, if I want to go run for Brad, I would need several areas of experience along the way in order for me to be a qualified candidate or for me to even hit Brad's deck. Is said organization I've started with provide me the opportunity to drive large loads, ride wide load? Do they provide those means? If not, then I need to be ensuring that I'm positioning myself to get the experience I need to then move myself to a carrier that's going to provide me different opportunities to drive different equipment or different loads. What does that look like? So it's, again, really that framework as to, what your end goal may be and what those short-term and long-term goals are going to look like.
Yeah, great points there, Sean. I think there's another thing that's the safety and the financial side of trucking that a lot of drivers, they have that dream. They want to own their own truck and potentially grow their own fleet. But coming right out of school, stressing the importance of that safety record is your entire resume to an extent. If you have a couple accidents that can really hurt your career or even put you off the road, and also not biting off more than you can chew early in your career. Say your goal is to become that owner operator, own your own truck, own your own trailer. Unless you've got 20 grand in the bank, solid credit, you're not going to be able to do that turnkey and understand all the aspects of that right away. So maybe it's better to go over the road, be a company driver, manage those finances, save up that safety net, and then make an educated call, like you said, Sean, with the right carrier, the right program to make that step.
Absolutely. And the number of drivers that don't understand the importance of their safety record still baffles me, especially with these newer drivers. I mean, they don't understand that if you're out messing around at 2 a.m. on a lawnmower and you catch a DUI, that's still going to affect your driving career, regardless of whether or not it was on 4 wheels that weren't going more than 15 mile an hour or 18 wheels that were going 70 mile an hour down the interstate. I mean, it's going to affect you pretty well the same. So one of the things that I want to hit on with you guys, because I've heard it several times throughout this conversation, is community. So we're living in an era now with truck drivers who are coming in, and rather than there being 3 jobs to every 1 truck driver, now there's 3 drivers to every 1 job. It's a little bit more cutthroat. People are a little bit more competitive as far as what's going on when they're trying to get on. So rather than being able to find some of those drivers on the forefront, maybe in your orientation classes where people are battling to try to make sure that they're getting that position, where else are we encouraging drivers to find that community, to be able to find those mentors?
Yeah, there's a couple solid, like I know in the flatbed community, the last couple of years of me transitioning from more drive-in reefer stuff to flatbed, there's a really cool couple of Facebook groups and things like that of big drivers that are, you could post your securement, hey, help me secure this load better, or got this question, and put it out where you may not have that one-on-one mentor, but you've got a group of 400 experienced flatbedders in there. So that's one that comes to mind.
spot on, man. And I really was sitting here digging for this amazing educated answer, but social media. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, obviously social media is a big part of all of our world. And it is a great way to really get yourself connected with those in the space. And even looking back to, the question about, what can I do to set myself up to achieve short-term and long-term goals is getting yourself involved with different groups, flatbed groups, heavy haul groups. I mean, you name it, there is going to be a little slice somewhere in the social media world that can fit into what it is you're looking for and what you may be looking to go. Heck, you may find out in these groups, this is not the route I wanted to go. What I felt or what I understood was my dream job is not my dream job. And, an unfortunate reality, the way to look at it these days is, yes, over the road, you can make a lot of money. But as we look at more and more of the new entrants into the space, the coveted job is where I can have that balance between home life, right? I'm not interested in being out for weeks at a time. I'm interested in being able to be home with my family. So it's great. I can make 6 figures being over the road and I can live the wildlife and the whole 9 yards, but is that really the life? Do you understand what it's like to prepare ramen noodles and live out of your truck? Is that the world that you're looking for? Not to belittle and not to discourage anyone, of course, but I mean, that's a reality. Many, again, starting and even those that have some experience space may not truly know and realize.
I'd say, listen, I've seen some of those trucking ramen noodle recipes as they're sitting there and preparing that stuff on the road. It looks better than some of my dinners some nights. So.
I'm telling you, I heard. We got 2 of us on this call.
Well, social media is such a hard thing to traverse these days, too, because you got to make sure you're looking at something that's appropriate for what you're looking for. If you're looking for something that's flashy or you're looking for something that's going to get clicks, you may not necessarily want to follow that advice. It might be fun entertainment, but you may be looking for a needle in a haystack when you're trying to find someone on social media that is kind of got the right idea. I know a good friend of ours, Six Logistics, and I cannot think of his name at all, but he's out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And he's got a small trucking company. I think 90% of trucking companies have less than 10 trucks or some number that's crazy like that. But his goal is safety. So all his trucks, he's got 10 of them. Every weekend, he's pre-tripping them at the yard, at the place where he goes and pre-trips them all. And he gets all the things fixed, the smallest things that need to be fixed. And then he highlights pictures of how his drivers secure loads. And then he talks about the securement and why it's important to do it this way. And then he shows pictures of someone that didn't secure the right way. That's a guy that I follow. And you always learn something new seeing somebody like that because, I never would have thought about that. Well, as a driver that's trying to get experience, you're not going to get experience until you run into it. But having that kind of ability to get out there on social media and see something like that, that's almost invaluable to a new driver or even somebody that's got experience that's not even dealt with something quite like that before. What do you say, guys?
Great call there, Zach. You got to know what to do and what not to do. One of my favorites out there is that Bonehead Truckers on YouTube. You guys check that out. Nothing but videos of drivers submitting what you shouldn't do out there. And it just gets a lot of great dialogue and it's a little laughable, some of the things that happen, but sometimes you're learning like, hey, I probably shouldn't do that.
Well, and I feel like, especially in those Facebook groups, it can also be a really valuable place for drivers to go in and get their footing as to where it is they want to be applying for those first jobs. Because I know I'm in several of the different groups on Facebook just because I want to be in on the conversations. I want to know what truck drivers are talking about and what's important to them. And seeing some of the support and seeing some of the verbiage they're using with some of these different companies. And when they come back and they say, listen, don't do it. Don't run with this company because everything that they're selling you is a total load of crap versus the other drivers that are coming in and saying, okay, but now that we've told you all the companies that you shouldn't go with, maybe look into these guys. Maybe this is where you're going to find your success. And here's why. That's huge, especially in today's market.
Absolutely. I find it interesting as well. A lot of the content that connects more is just drivers being real, telling their story, the good, bad, the ugly with the companies out there. Just one word of warning for drivers. If you see nothing but positive reviews, all positive about the company you're coming on board, I'd be asking a few more questions because every company, no matter how hard we try, no matter how good we are, there's going to be good and bad. Anybody that says they're perfect, they're lying right out the gate.
Absolutely.
We live in a world where, again, I think was it puppy dogs and candy canes or was it sunshine and flowers, Brad? We started this thing off with, but, ultimately, again, it's a double-edged sword with social media, with rating systems and overall needing to make that humanizing connection in all of it, no matter what the channel might be. having a 15-year-old daughter, right? We live, in a TikTok world, and it's that like, oh, this video is great. They live a great life, or this is perfect. Well, it took them 80 takes to get that perfect video that lasted all of 10 seconds. So, your real raw footage, real raw involvement with those that are living and breathing what's taking place is pertinent. I can't think of a better opportunity, especially with the multiple different components, different equipment types. I mean, there are so many different moving pieces within the general trucking industry. You absolutely have to find those right key pieces of connections that are really going to allow you to do it right and do yourself right.
Yes, and that authenticity piece is key, be it with the company that you're looking for, be it with the mentor that you're looking at, be it with the recruiter that you're working with. If they're not willing to tell you the good, bad, and the ugly, then you're working with the wrong people.
Well, yeah, that's the honest truth. I mean, no one is ever going to be honest with you when they're always telling you one side of the scope. If they're always telling you how terrible it is over there, well, you can't even trust that either. But if they're always telling you how good it is, then what are they hiding? And we're talking about recruiting techniques and marketing strategies. How do companies tailor their marketing strategies to attract the new drivers versus experience? Because there's a big gap. You're going to have the people with the experience. There's a significant gap between them and the ones that are new, because they're going to maybe be a little bit more jaded, or I guess jaded is not the right word. They're going to be a little bit more reserved, whereas a new driver, and it's hard to understand what you're going to haul freight-wise, commodity-wise. You can't go out there, look up trucking companies and be like, oh, well, I want to haul nuclear waste. Where would I go to apply for that job? It seems like a lot of these jobs where you may have an idea, like I want to haul military vehicles in a flatbed. Well, how do I figure out how to get to that point? So how do companies tailor their marketing recruitment strategies for the new drivers versus what the experienced drivers have done before in the past?
I see far less transparency, and I see much more of the sunshine and puppy dogs. The unfortunate reality for student drivers is that they're pigeonholed to the fact that there's only so many carriers out there that are positioned and able to hire them and bring them on to get that experience. So for many, they want to highlight all of the tuition reimbursements, all the great pieces of the puzzle, with the emphasis that get your experience with us. You can gain all the experience you need with us, with the overall idea that once you get your experience, you're probably going to move on to another carrier or another role or whatever that case may be. So on the experience guys, I see much more transparent, much more of the specifics as to, what freight you can expect. Really, what can your run times look like? Really, what is average pay? What are bonuses going to look like? I do see much more tangible and transparent information as it relates to the job and expectations. But again, it's not to sit and say that some of that isn't still also the sunshine. So there is not a stark difference between the two, as obviously the goal is to paint in a positive light and to attract and take interest into the role. But it really is having the student drivers in such a position, and they all know that there's only so many places you can go. So essentially you have a handful or a collection of organizations that are almost all saying the exact same thing, because they know that there's only so many places that these guys can go, and they kind of have a stranglehold on the market, for lack of better terms.
Kind of sounds like the media that we currently have, right? Whatever subject is popular, everybody kind of has the same response. They have the same pre-organized message. And I would say that's a common misstep that companies are making, because they're losing the authenticity, like Chelsea talked about, of the newer drivers. So those newer drivers are going to grow up. Just like kids are going to grow up and learn, hey, wait a minute, Santa Claus isn't real. Why did you wait till I was 15 to tell me it wasn't, or they didn't discover it? But like, how are companies going to be able to save face? Brad, how are some companies going to be able to save face in this market when drivers start to realize, wait a minute, this is a bunch of BS and now I got to deal with it, but I'm here and I can't just change my job because they're telling me not to hop. So what do I do now that I can't hop?
Well, Zach, first and foremost, my mom always said, if you don't believe, you don't receive. So take that for what it's worth with Santa. But for the topic with the drivers there, brand reputation really comes to mind, that your brand is what drivers are going to tell other drivers out there. And that's only, your marketing can only go so far. If you're putting lipstick on a pig with your marketing and putting out there that stuff that's not going to be consistent or not what you're going to be able to deliver on, the truth is going to come out over time, whether that be in your reputation as drivers share their stories on social media, word of mouth to other drivers, or drivers taking that leap, coming on board, and then leaving quickly when they realize that you're not delivering on what you sold me.
Yeah, and I'm here to tell you, I've had pigs more than once. You might get lipstick on them pretty well one time, but after that one time, it's going to be pretty hard to hide the fact that you're not getting it on there right.
It's as expensive as running a video ad or a TV ad, right? So, Brad, to your point, if you're seeing companies spend a lot of money on their marketing, spend a lot of money on the radio, and you're hearing that same, you might want to think to yourself, why are they having such a high turnover problem? Why are they spending out all this money? They're not the only trucking company that's out there. There's some pretty reputable companies out there that aren't spending what they are. And maybe that's a conversation that you need to have with maybe somebody like Sean, who's in the industry, that knows a lot of this stuff behind the scenes of what trucking companies are doing and hears from a lot of different companies and has kind of like a gumbo experience behind what you see. I mean, Sean, what do you think about all this?
If we were focusing on recruitment and our hiring to retain and look for longevity, then obviously we would have, the perfect world or the perfect scenario. But the fact of the matter is, what is the end game or what is the overall goal for said recruiter, for said company? Is it just putting butts in seats? Right? There are going to be those companies. All we do is put butts in seats. We don't have training. We just ship them off and get them out. While there's others that are very thorough and provide a strong opportunity and program. When said and done, you find yourself not in a scenario or in a place where you need to be. It's fair to be transparent. So you commented on, I don't want to be a job hopper. I can't be a job hopper. Well, fool me once, on me. What is it? Fool me twice, on you, or one of those type of scenarios. But it's not to say it isn't okay to move jobs or move careers. We all make mistakes, but it's if consistently making one mistake after another, whether it's you or is it them, at some point in time, the tire has to hit the road with what am I doing here and what is my direction ultimately going to be with what I'm doing. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Being in the trenches on the recruiting side, to your point there, Sean, there's a couple things I've seen that drivers that they have that quality approach in those conversations. So one, they're doing their research on the company, everything they can get out there online. They're asking those recruiters that tough question of what's your driver culture like? What's your driver turnover like? See how they respond to that tough question, because not a lot of drivers are asking that. And then the third thing I think is really cool is drivers that ask to talk to existing drivers in the fleet. There's no you could spend $1 million in advertising. It's not going to have the same weight of a conversation than a driver hearing another driver's real experience with your company.
Absolutely. And one of the other conversations that I feel like isn't being had a whole lot is the other end of that, which is the fact that as I'm coming in as a new driver, maybe I only have 3 months of experience, and I'm coming in and I'm talking to multiple different companies and asking them, can I have the job that you're marketing for? And they're saying, well, no, you don't have enough experience. That door is shut. No, you don't have the 9 months requirement, and that door is shut. But nobody's really telling them why. Why is it that we need to have that 9 months worth of experience or that year's worth of experience before these bigger carriers are looking at a lot of these drivers?
Insurance.
Explain a little bit more about that, Sean. For all of the drivers out there listening, what is it about insurance? What does that look like?
When the day is said and done, you're considered a liability the less experience you have, meaning you don't understand, the fullest usage of your equipment. You may or may not know and understand all, safety protocols at some point in time in your career. Is a plethora, but it ultimately comes down to liability and insurance. And the fact that you are a novice or new to the space means you are a high risk for said carrier to bring you on, which then requires more costs. So what, unfortunately, on the back end or the big picture in all this is everybody's trying to run sustainable businesses, right? I would not be able to hire you as a driver if I were not looking to run a sustainable business. In order to hire any drivers, I have to be able to acquire insurance. As I hire different types of drivers, right, I have to have various forms of insurance depending upon who I am, where I am, and what I'm hauling. So that can dictate the how and the why. So it may not even necessarily be you as a driver or your 9 months of great experience or just shy of 9 months of the year that you made to be. It may completely be the fact that you unfortunately take my costs way through the roof, and all of a sudden, the truck that you may be driving is actually running in the red. I'm no longer making money because I'm paying it on insurance to hire.
Great point, Sean. Insurance, if you're a brand new 16-year-old and you hand them the $50,000 SUV, that insurance premium is going to be a heck of a lot more than my wife who's never had a ticket in her career, knock on wood. So from the driver's perspective as well, a lot of people outside the industry don't understand that while a trucking company may have $100 million in revenue, every trucking company off there is operating on very slim margins. So any area of risk in business, any business you're running risk, you're providing a service, you have moving pieces out there. we have to make educated guesses as to putting the right quality person in there. And unfortunately, experience and safety record are the two things that are a big differentiator when it comes to those insurance risk conversations.
Great answer.
Yeah, those are big deals. Those are the things that, I mean, without the insurance and without the lawyers, we wouldn't have half of the costs that we have, but we also wouldn't have half of the protections that we have. So there is some give and take when it comes to that stuff. Everybody's always bad mouthing insurance and bad mouthing the lawyers. Well, there's a good reason why we do that. But, talking about bad mouthing, mental health is a really big piece. Drivers that transition over to becoming drivers, right? And this is kind of a transitionary topic, but your mental health is going to follow you anywhere you go. So the different amounts of stress are probably going to squeeze those different areas out of you a little bit more so than maybe another one. So if you're not used to driving over the road, or you're not used to being active behind the wheel or active physically involved all day long, you're going to want to have a transition period. You want to talk to people who have been over the road, that have come off of maybe someone that was started out driving when they were 21. They're going to have a different level of understanding versus someone that maybe started a second career doing it. And so your mental health is going to take an impact, because that's what happens when you're put under pressure. That's what happens when we're put under stress. So guys, let's talk about transitioning to an over-the-road lifestyle or transitioning to a trucking lifestyle, and how important mental health is for that and your family as well, because a lot of times people have found themselves in a mental health situation when they don't feel like they have anywhere to turn. And so family is almost just as important as the person that's driving that piece of equipment, because they're the ones that see these people in and day out that could be there to help them. And how open-minded do people need to be, especially drivers, when they're transitioning to a new position from maybe one that's not truck driving?
It's a tough transition no matter what you're coming from. Is that there's very few other careers that you're going to be away from your family for probably extended periods of time. So you need to, one, understand that and accept what you're jumping into from a personal standpoint, but also you need to educate those close to you, your friends and your family, that, hey, I'm going to be out on the road 10 to 14 days at a time and then get my time off. I'm not going to be able to make all of those social gatherings and probably do a lot of the things that we're used to in the past. And talking through, this is the reason why I'm making this change, is to provide a better living for my wife, my kids, or whatever your situation looks like. So explaining why, understanding yourself, what you're getting into, and then help educating those close to you, I think has a big impact.
Definitely. And a lot of what we've touched on overall, planning, having yourself set for success overall, when we transition to any number of different things, it is important to have that plan, and have that support system overall. Mental wellness is a very important topic for myself specifically. And it is integral to have that support system overall and have them understand, what may or may not be to come. In addition to, again, the social media groups, those, in the space that you can buddy with and partner with that have experienced this and may have some tactics in place that you can, utilize or put into play as you start to experience and see, what mental effects may take place as you transition. Bad joke, but, I'm a work from home guy. Everybody thinks work from home is great. It is, I'm not going to lie, but let me tell you, never in my life did I think I would miss that drive home from work. You sit and you think that's great, I get to work from home, but the work-life balance, literally I roll out of here at 5:30 and there's my 15-year-old, my dog, my wife, and all the other crap that goes on with my life, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great to work from home until you realize you don't have a break from working here to working there, and it's no different. I'm moving from a local role to I'm going to be out on the road for years at a time. I have to have a plan in place in order to manage myself and have the proper people in place to understand and be monitoring who I'm doing, what I'm doing, how have I changed, and be upfront and transparent.
One last thing to add there is that the physical and mental health are tied together, as so much research is showing. So great folks out there like Michael Lombard, Dr. Mark out there promoting that physical and mental health in the driver space. You need to understand that that's a big step as well, that sitting behind the wheel 10, 11 hours a day is going to have an impact on your routine, your eating habits, your workout habits, and how are you going to handle that as well so that your physical body can help take care of your mental state as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just to speak to that real quick, Brad, like your reaction time, right? When you react to something one way, your tendency to react to it in the same manner gets bigger and bigger over time. just kind of like a snowball. So when you've witnessed someone else that you're working with, oh, wait a minute, I'm new. That's how that guy reacted. If I react the same way, just like you might have watching your parents drive when you're growing up, and you look at that. My dad used to always call them jokers on the road. Look at that joker over there. And I always laugh about it. But that mental health piece starts young. And if you don't catch it, like I'll catch myself. I've got a 15-year-old too, Sean, and I'll have to catch myself and say, hey, listen, it's not your responsibility to catch me. But if you hear me doing or seeing this, ask me if everything's okay. Because chances are something may not be, and I don't know it yet. And I don't want to tell you everything that's going on. But drivers have that same kind of relationship with whoever you've got in your life that's out there. There's nothing more important than your own mental health and well-being, because that's at the end of the day, this is a job. You need to get back home at the end of the job, at the end of the day. Make sure you're reaching out to the right people.
Okay, so as a new driver, you guys have given a whole checklist. You guys have said, no, I'm not going to be able to go out and get every job because insurance and liability is going to keep me from being able to jump out there with no experience. You've told me that I need to go out and I need to find longevity with a job. So I need to find the right position that's going to be the right fit and be able to stick there for at least 9 months to a year. I've heard that I need to be looking for authenticity, not just in the people that I'm looking with to build my community, but also in the recruiters that I'm working with on these positions that I'm looking to get into, and the companies themselves. That I need to watch the company culture and make sure that it's a training culture that remains engaging towards the driver throughout my entire time with them, and not just for that first week on the job. That I need to make sure that my mental health is in check, and that I have taken into consideration what it's going to look like once I get out on the road, and what that transition is going to be from, whatever job that I'm coming out of and into the trucking world, where I may be gone for 10 to 14 days at a time. Anything that I'm missing.
It sounds like even more when you just recap it all together there, Chelsea, but it's a lot, and just you have to think big picture, think long term. And as you mentioned, there's a lot to consider, but it's a very important step that will impact your career forever.
Absolutely. And I really feel like this conversation right here is one that we need to be having on a much bigger picture and much more out in the open, just because of the fact that it took us getting 4 people together to have a conversation regarding this when we were seeing everybody that's not doing it at CDL schools. Because they're just handing these kids or these grown adults, whichever way we're going. Maybe we're coming out of high school and we're going into CDL school. Maybe we've decided to start a second career with it. But they're handing them a CDL and saying, okay, give me your money. Off you go. And instead, they're not getting those pointers. So we really appreciate you guys coming on today in order to have these conversations and get into the nitty gritty with it, because the drivers need to know. They need to know what they're getting into.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having us on. Certainly, look forward to future opportunities. I'm not going to speak for Brad, but I'm going to say I think everybody on this call has the driver in the best interest. When the day is said and done, what I do and what keeps me in quote unquote recruitment advertising is I'm helping people. I've been blessed to find myself, to get myself in the seat, and have been helped by many people along the way to get myself to where I am today. And my experience in the industry and what got me here, what keeps me here may be a little bit different than the driver, but I've certainly learned much along the way. And all I can say is that we are here to help. Without the drivers, without interest in having a CDL, our world stops as we know. So anything and everything we can do to help empower and strengthen those that are new to getting into the space, heck, even those that have been doing this for decades. Absolutely happy to be a resource and happy to be a champion on behalf of the driver.
Guys, thanks for coming on board. Sean Horton with jobsandlogistics.com, Brad Hackett, C1 Transportation. Where can our listeners find you guys? Are you on social media, LinkedIn? Where can we find you guys?
Yeah, drive4c1.com is the driver focus for us. And then we're all over social media as well. Just do some search and we'd love to chat.
And if you really want to find Brad, you can find him on LinkedIn. That's where I stalked him and found him for this episode. So if you're looking for him, go look there.
Love it. Same on this end. You want to track me down. LinkedIn is probably my preferred means of communicating and overall from a social media perspective, but you can find both myself and my organizations all across social media and online at any given point in time. Anybody and everybody can find me specifically, or I'm blessed to have a large team that has many years of the industry experience that does share the same compassion that I do. I'll be happy to help, again, with anything and everything for the drivers.
We sure do appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. And until next time, we'll see you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Drive. For more from Handle Now, Chelsea, and myself, head to handlenow.com and sign up for our newsletter. You can also join our Facebook group called The Driver's Seat and follow us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.